I'm of the strong opinion that if we get to know the people who head up and maintain a project, well, then we get to understand what the guiding principles are.
Yeah.
And in the case of some projects that say, hey, we don't have an ideology, we don't have any kind of an agenda, well, then we know there's an agenda.
If you say you don't have an agenda or an ideology, you really do. You're just not saying it.
For
because
sure.
it would be inconvenient for you to say such things.
Yeah.
Such as the agenda. I want to make lots of money, for example. That's an inconvenient agenda. In the crypto space, it doesn't sound that great, does it?
There have to be incentives and they have to be aligned. Otherwise, nothing gets done. I'm glad you see the necessity of this last bit of questions. It's also a lot of fun just to talk to people around the industry and see, hey, what is your unique take on this aspect of what we all kind of consider to be a given, right? A postulate of working in the cryptocurrency space is that there is cryptography applied, ergo certain aspects of what we're doing are meant to either be anonymized or private. And a lot of people, myself included, as a layperson coming into this space only a few years ago, I had some misunderstandings about some of the public ledger systems that I needed to educate myself on. And it was a wake-up call. This is going to be kind of like taking the vitals of the project. The coin supply for LOKI. What is the total available coin supply right now? And then what is the end goal when the final block reward is emitted?
There is no final block reward.
Oh,
like it's not like Bitcoin. In fact, most blockchains these days aren't like Bitcoin where, well, even in Bitcoin, you still have the mining rewards. The idea is it goes on forever. There is no finite end to a blockchain in the typical sort of implementation. Current supply, I don't actually know off the top of my head. I think it's something like 40 something. I don't know.
Hey, it's not a trick question. I don't have the Block Explorer pulled up, and you consider this may be published 2 weeks from now.
I don't like getting anything wrong. 45 million thereabouts.
Great.
Yeah, 45 million LOKI. We've done a lot of work in terms of our emission curve. We've done a lot of work in terms of our economics. We've made several proposals to the community, including one more recently to reduce our overall inflation as we go towards proof of stake, which is a whole nother subject, but we're moving away from proof of work, which I know is near and dear to your heart.
Well, Ruben Yap outed you. I was talking to Ruben Yap over at Zcoin, and he was like, yeah, I talked to, I don't know if he was talking to you or somebody else from
Yeah, he was talking to me.
And and he said, yeah, that RandomX was such a ball ache that they just said they were done with proof of work. I was like, what? Like, why isn't this headline news? I mean, cryptocurrency is a weird space, but I was surprised I hadn't heard it yet.
A lot of discussion in the community on our LOKI improvement proposal GitHub page. There's a whole argument for why proof of work, especially when you already have some sort of staking system in place, is just sucking value out of the system and not actually providing much in the way of benefits anymore.
Certainly. Well, if I may, I'm going to ask you to revisit that in just a minute here. And what you got to know is that I don't think that your reasons for doing that will be that weird to me. And I think that I think there'll be a lot of people in the mining space, at least as long as they're not like silicon bag holders, right? With a warehouse full of 15,000 GPUs or whatever, I'm sure they'll understand. But But just kind of going through the vitals of the project, right now transactions per second, and then I should ask first, block time. If people don't like the total available supply at this moment, how long do they have to wait for it to change?
Well, it's growing all the time. I don't understand the question.
What is the block time, and how many coins are emitted at each block?
The block time is 2 minutes, and the total block reward is currently on a descending curve going towards 28 LOKI per block, and it will stay at 28 LOKI per block forever. That's a way that we've been able to engineer a kind of acceptable emission curve to keep service node rewards high, to keep our network functioning over time. There's a real world cost associated with running service nodes, and the whole point of the network is that service is provided. So we actually have to make sure that there is always reward available. So
it's a novel concept. You're generating block reward for real world value.
Yeah. Wow. My word. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not just a security thing. It's also LOKI's kind of different in that the block reward is used to pay for more than just transaction security. It's also used to pay for message storage, onion routing. And we now, this last week, we had our 7th hard fork, I think it was, which enabled a feature on the blockchain called Blink, which allows for instant settlement payments. So yes, the block time may be 2 minutes, but in fact, that really doesn't have much of an impact anymore, because once we finished all the wallet integrations for that, you'll be able to send people money instantly and it will confirm. And then we have another feature coming up called reblinking, which will allow them to then instantly send that money on as well, like straight away. So we have this quorum system built in the service node network that allows for transactions which haven't yet been included into a block to still be considered an unlocked output that can be spent on our blockchain straight away. So it's more like what we expect money to be rather than what a blockchain typically constrains it to be.
Makes sense. There's a lot of talk in a lot of different circles, whether it's crypto Twitter or other areas where blockchain enthusiasts live. A lot of talk about how there's the cult of Satoshi, right? And how Satoshi, he was like this tech prophet, right? Everything that Satoshi said, he, she, they, probably, I think we talked about this, probably the CIA, right? Probably the NSA or whatever. He, she, they.
Yeah.
They just had all of this insight and forward looking with the supply cap and with the block time and with a lot of the restrictions, right? Generating value through scarcity, as it were, in so many different ways. And I think it's become plain in the 10 years since Satoshi is almost 10 years since he totally ghosted, that plenty of innovation has taken place. And as you're saying, there's a lot of pain associated with using what Satoshi left behind. So, so kudos for addressing some of that pain. Let's go back to a little bit about, you mentioned the emission curve will ultimately, it'll taper off at 28 LOKI per block, right?
Currently, but we have a scheme that we're looking to implement when proof of stake comes in to reduce that down to 20. That's my current proposal. So because we don't have to generate value to give to miners anymore to provide security, the question remains, well, what are we going to do with the block, part of the block reward that was being given to them? Do we get rid of it completely? Do we give it to service nodes? I did some maths on this. The long and the short of it is, I think if we reduce it from 28 to 20 and give all of that to service nodes, it'll actually mean that the service node network is far more stable, a bit larger, and less likely to have steep drop-offs during periods of price volatility. So that's what I'm proposing. So come down to 20. In terms of percentage inflation each year, what that actually means for the growth of the circulating supply over time, we think really long and hard about the way that we've designed our emission system, and we're not afraid to change it based on the best that we can see going forward. So
awesome.
I don't know if this will be the last time we change it after proof of stake. I hope so. I think we've been refining it down. This is a relatively small change in comparison to the one we did before. So I think we're optimizing towards a pretty good area at the moment.
It just dawns on me that I'm wearing a Monero hat, and you and Josh were so kind to send me the LOKI t-shirts, not what I'm wearing. But I want you to know that I do wear your merch out in public, and I'm very happy when people see it and they ask.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So it's a project that I definitely, I think, adds a lot of value, just in my limited understanding of the roadmap at this point. But the problem and the pain that you initially saw, and I think we talked about this, gosh, what was it, a year and 2 months ago? 16 months ago? It's been some time now. But when we first spoke, I asked you, I think, whose problem are you solving, or what pain are you solving? And I'm going to ask further, is there a personal anecdote, or can you speak to to something of a personal nature where somebody was maybe scratching their own itch by saying, we need to make LOKI?
I'm not sure how I answered that question 18 months ago. That would have been very interesting to know what I said. I imagine it was probably...
I think you mentioned that there were a couple of failed attempts at a meme coin or a joke coin first.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. In terms of scratching my own itch, I mean, not always, but upon learning more about private messaging in particular, but also just the way that these decentralized anonymization tools work, is that there's definitely room for improvement. I think that the privacy community in the digital technology space has always been looking for the next best thing, the thing that we can get to next that has the next best set of properties. And we're good at slowly iterating on that. So we go from unencrypted telnet connections to our servers to SSH, and we go from just raw HTTP to HTTPS. And just over time, we improve the protocols that we have to achieve greater levels of security and greater levels of privacy. And so an itch that I wanted to scratch with Loki is that because we have this self-regulating service node network, we can actually create a decentralized backend architecture for a new type of private messaging where it's end-to-end encrypted. That remains unchanged. So no one can read messages. You have perfect forward secrecy and other really nice properties. But we also have a system where the routing of the messages is anonymous and the storage of messages is outside of the realm of a single central server. So there is very limited metadata that can actually be gleaned from sending of messages, so that with our new product, well, it's not our new product, it's just our newly named product, Session, we can actually have conversations with each other and in small groups where no one else but the participants can read the messages or know that the conversation is taking place. That's the aim of the game. It's not a problem that people have really tried to tackle in a single package, and that largely comes down to the fact that they don't have this really unique type of network called the service node network, which is self-regulating, permissionless, but also there's a rule set that is enforced, and it's enforced economically. There's no other network like that that can readily be used by mainstream applications like Signal or WhatsApp or whatever. So this is not something that they would ever be able to do, and they've said that they're not going down that route. So we have a real leading advantage in advancing privacy technology through having this decentralized anonymization system on the networking level and the storage system that allows us to move away from that centralized server architecture. So it's really exciting stuff. Have you looked into Session much yet?
So I haven't looked at the rebrand to Session, but I am familiar with the Whisper protocol on Signal, and I'm familiar that NSO penetrated it on WhatsApp, and that it's probably a safe assumption that groups like NSO have penetrated Whisper protocol in other implementations as well. So for my part, I've heard that Sessions, that Loki Messenger was being rebranded to Sessions. I just haven't begun to work with it yet. A couple other projects hit my desk as well, like Mix and Wallet, where they are their whole thing was trying to attach a multi-wallet to their fork of Signal. But I don't know that it does, or I don't know that it does for messaging or for privacy what the Loki team has been focused on. So my apologies. I should be already more involved.
The website is getsession.org. There's currently not a lot there. Tell me if you think it looks pretty.
That's awesome. So it sounds like this is becoming kind of this is becoming like the public offering for the person that isn't interested in crypto, but just secure messaging.
Yeah, absolutely. There are crypto integrations. Obviously, it depends on the crypto backend, but this is becoming our flagship product quite quickly.
I'm going to go ahead and screen share so we have this as a backdrop. Great. So coming soon on all the platforms that people use.
All the platforms, that's right. Hopefully by the end, maybe by the time this comes out, this will have dropped. We'll actually have the app out, which will be exciting.
Great.
If not, it'll be very soon by the time this comes out.
Exciting. Can I ask really briefly? I'm seeing desktop OSs. I just had a pithy conversation with a friend who swears by FreeBSD as his desktop OS. A little hardcore. I'm okay with using Fedora or Ubuntu. Do you have plans to support Linux?
What do you mean? This is the Linux logo right there.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah. It was hiding in plain sight. It was beguiling me. It's end of day for me. Yeah, you just had your coffee. It's been some hours since I've had my caffeine.
I use Elementary OS on a daily basis. It's the only Linux distribution that doesn't make me want to pop my eyeballs out of my socket because of the way it looks. It actually looks pretty good. It's also based on Ubuntu, so I can get all of the packages that come with all of the nice benefits that come with it, but it's in a much better looking package.
So just a different desktop environment then for Ubuntu?
A couple other features as well. I use the Pantheon desktop environment, but it's its own thing, sort of. But if you dig under the surface, it's all Ubuntu, but it's pretty nice. I recommend it.
I might try it. I've been considering switching back from Fedora. It's been some time since I was on Fedora, and package management, you wind up having to use like Flatpak and everything else, and the Snap Store, which essentially is just repackaging Deb packages from Ubuntu anyway. So
yeah, that's right.
So okay, cool. Yeah, again, I don't pretend to be a developer or an actual techie. I just play one on YouTube. So pay me no mind. Wanted to ask about the team on Loki right now. Simon, you're in a unique position to be able to give people some very meaningful shout outs. Who would you say on your team helps make Loki a very unique project, or give it unique value because of team?
This is going to be kind of a cop out, but I'd like to say everyone on this list. We being the executive team and the development team, go to extraordinary lengths to recruit the right people. We don't just hire anyone. We spend months looking for candidates. We've developed a pretty stringent process for screening those candidates, especially when it comes to development roles, with our coding interviews. And essentially it means that we end up with a team that has this amazing culture and this amazing energy that is very, very hard to replicate. So we've got a really special thing going here. I think this needs to be updated. Actually, there's several faces that are not here.
And I gave you the difficult task of asking you which of your children is your favorite. So it's a no generally. I just meant to ask if there's any particular part that's. No, I guess I did really ask. I put such an impossible task there. There are so many small projects that I talk to, so many scrappy, lean crypto startups and tech startups that kind of have this overlap in this space where you ask them that question and say, there are only 3 of us. So the list doesn't take very long to get through. This is really phenomenal though, what you built and the team that you've assembled. So I appreciate that you want to give everybody their due credit. Let me ask this, as far as sticking with Project Vitals, collabs. This is something that I like to ask crypto projects, especially now in 2020. We've seen, it's just crypto in general. We've seen this since the earliest forks of Bitcoin and the earliest meme coins, that projects come, projects go, but the goodwill between development teams stays when you do things like responsible disclosure of bugs that you found, or when you collab on specific features or problems. What are some of the success stories of Loki in collaborating with other coin projects or other technology projects?
We don't actually have as many examples of this as we could have if we actually went out and made an active effort to do collaboration. We do have some examples. There have been some, moments of synergy throughout our history, and they're always good when they do come. But I think, I'm going to get a bit Gavin Wood on everyone now and say that, at the end of the day, we like to think this is all friendly and great, but the reality is at the end of the day that ultimately we're competing for attention now because there is a drastic oversupply of projects. And at the moment, well, for the last couple of years anyway, the supply of interested parties to keep these projects alive is limited. So naturally, we do actually have to compete for attention, and we do actually, that there is actually a real case to be made for the fact that you shouldn't just hand over all of your cool stuff to other people if you can avoid it. If you do actually have a unique selling point, which is you have particular knowledge in a particular area, innovating in a particular way that no one else has thought of or no one else is able to pull off yourself, you shouldn't just be given that away willy-nilly. And you should always try to be focusing on your own product first, because at the end of the day, you've got people that have contributed to your project, that are invested in your ideas, and you want to make sure that they and your own team are the primary beneficiaries of the work that you do. That should be the objective of any sane organization. So we haven't made a great deal of effort to go and, hey guys, you should use all of our stuff and look at these great ideas that you should implement in your own blockchain because it'll work for you guys just like it worked for us and we came up with it. So here you go, have a free idea. We haven't really been doing a lot of that, but there have been some moments. Obviously, being a fork of Monero, we found a number of improvements that we could make to the core protocol, and we've pushed those back as upstream changes to make sure that, while we take features from Monero, we also pushing back stuff that we think should be implemented in there. A personal one that I instigated was the fact that I needed to get a printout of all my transactions from the command line interface, and there was no facility to do that. So we wrote that up and we submitted it, and now both Monero and Loki, you can get a CSV file of all your transactions like that. So, just little things like that, back and forth. And obviously a lot of the bigger stuff we're doing, like Monero is never going to integrate a service node network. So all of those features are completely irrelevant to Monero, and that's fine because we're on different paths. We've got different ideals, whatever, not a problem.
That's part of the reason that I ask is that there winds up being a lot of not necessarily IP, but just good advice or just sometimes goodwill that's communicated through identifying a problem and communicating there's a problem in a responsibly disclosed way. So that you don't allow for other networks to be completely destroyed. Some might even argue that if you do see that there's a serious threat, a la Zero Coin, right? Everybody discovered, oh no, Zero Coin's broken. Privacy on Zero Coin's broken. Anybody who, gave musical chairs, anybody left in the end was screwed.
I think, there is definitely a goodwill when it comes to security things. The CryptoNote community in general does share a lot of common qualities in terms of core protocol design, and also mining and difficulty has been an ongoing issue in the early days of Loki that we had to contribute and participate in the sort of small CryptoNote coin community because we all faced similar challenges with mining algorithms, difficulty algorithms, hash attacks, that sort of thing. There was a bit of an epidemic at one point, so there was a lot of disclosure going on around there. And we borrowed algorithms and we took our own algorithms and modified them, and then other people took them and whatever else. But to bring it all together to probably our most successful collab, I'll first talk about how we abused a collab between the other two projects that we've collabed with. So there's Monero, obviously, which you know about, and then there's this project called Arweave. I'm very good friends with Sam Williams, the CEO of that project. It's a decentralized storage network that behaves kind of similarly to IPFS, as in once it's on this system, you can go to an address and it'll pull it down off the network. But the way it works in the back end is so much smarter. It's like what Filecoin should have been, in my opinion. The consensus mechanism itself is called proof of access. So miners actually have to store an entire history of the blockchain, and the blockchain actually contains all of the data that's been uploaded to the system. So it's called a block weave. There's data in the blockchain. So to be able to create new blocks, you need to be able to reference data in previous data. So you need to have access to as much of it as possible, as quickly as possible, so that you can gather the necessary data from history and then hash that to produce the new block. So everyone's incentivized to store as much as possible. And then there's also this tit for tat system going on where, because if this becomes hundreds of terabytes in size, very few people are actually going to be able to contain all of that data in one sitting. So they have to be able to access it from other people, but also give away data to other people. So there's a sharing system that goes on. That means that there's a lot of data replication happening, and it ensures that there's always a copy of the data available. It's a very, very cool project. You can look more into it yourself if you like, arweave.org. Anyway, so we told Sam about the polymorphic hashing algorithms that Monero was talking about at the time, and he was like, oh, yeah, that'd be great if it was like CPU only and like very hard to ASIC and FPGA and blah, blah, blah. It solves a lot of my problems. So then he got together with Monero, and they both chipped in funds to get RandomX audited. So Monero and Arweave got RandomX audited, and then as soon as it was audited, we were like, sweet, we're going to take that now. So we took that algorithm only because we were hard forking earlier than them. So we had it before they did.
I noticed that in the early, so I wasn't following super closely, but Monero, generally speaking, is like the test net for Monero. And when they were testing out RandomX, it seemed like, all right, it's up for grabs. Anybody who wants to adjust scratchpad values can do that now. Is that about what happened?
That's basically what happened. We called ours random XL because Loki.
That's great though. Oh,
Yeah.
it makes it doubly tragic that you're not using it anymore. Oh my gosh.
We're still using it, but we don't want to.
Okay. It's just the branding.
Anyway,
so
the actual collab we did was with Arweave. We created this thing called Silo. So they have the basic idea of their network is that once you upload data to it, it never goes away. You can always access it. Censorship-resistant data storage. That's the point. We've got an anonymization network that we think is better than other anonymization networks out there. So we're like, sweet, what could we do with this? So we created this tool. Me and Sam sat down in Central Park in New York one day at Consensus, and we were like really frazzled from Consensus. So we just sat down on a rock and we came up with this idea. And the idea is that I can walk past you in a park and say a word and a number, and then you can anonymously retrieve that data without anyone else knowing that that data even exists or what it is. So it's called Silo. It currently works. It's a pretty neat little feature, but we haven't created a self-contained app yet, so it's kind of hard to use at the moment. But this is probably something now that LokiNet's on mainnet that we'll put a little bit more effort into. But it's kind of like a physical secure drop kind of deal. So the example we always have is bubble.7. So if I walk past you in a park and go bubble.7, and then you go, cool. And then you keep walking. And then you go home, you type in bubble.7 into Silo, and then what happens is the word bubble gets hashed 7 into the power of 7 times to avoid rainbow table attacks. And then you take the result of that. The first half will be, or some half of it will be the transaction ID on the Arweave. So then you go retrieve that, and then you have an encrypted file. And then you take the other half of that hash, and that is the decryption key. So now you can decrypt the data. When it gets uploaded to retrieve, it goes through LokiNet. So your identity is never known, your IP address is never known. So you can anonymously store and retrieve data using only 2 words, like only a very, very small piece of information.
I don't think it's any coincidence that I was speaking to somebody not long ago who they were talking about means that are available today that are accessible and fairly simple to use today for journalists to be able to get secure messaging out and to talk securely about various different issues that they have. So being able to use something like what you just mentioned for people who are most vulnerable, talking about issues that are most pressing and getting messages, or in some cases, larger volumes of data out. It's pretty valuable. So like a few JPEGs, right? Or a few high resolution photos, or maybe a highly compressed MPEG-4 file of video of something that's highly sensitive. That'd be a pretty big deal.
With Arweave, you can upload files that are bigger than that. The point of Arweave, though, is that it never goes away. But if you just wanted to send something quickly to someone else, you could do that entirely within session, and it wouldn't be an issue. You can send files of up to 10 megabytes without an issue. So
sure, but the ability to, like you mentioned, give somebody the means to then access to retrieve something using a simple mnemonic, right? Like a name, like a word, and then a number.
Yeah, it doesn't require you to set up any fancy accounts or whatever. You can literally just get the software on whatever device you have available to you at the time. It'll connect through LokiNet, so your retrieval's anonymous, and then boom, you can get the file, decrypt it. No one else ever knew what it was.
Definitely cool. So it sounds like then you've done some like table napkin collabs with friends.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So kind of moving on to some of the initial vital questions about the project. And I think you talked about this the last time that we chatted with the team, but funding early on with Loki, apparently there was some controversy in the beginning, but obviously you've worked with the community and there hasn't been any kind of misunderstanding moving forward. But how were you funded, and how is Loki funded now? How do you anticipate being funded moving into the future?
We did a ICO, private sale in March of 2018. We raised about $9 million US, and that is how we funded ourselves to date, and that is how we continue to fund ourselves for the next couple of years at least. So the future funding model of Loki is to do with what the foundation can earn from the block reward between service nodes and the block reward itself. There's a little percentage that just gets given to the foundation. Whether or not that will be enough to sustain the foundation in the long run is dependent on how valuable Loki is in the future. So that remains to be seen. But no, our funding model has been pretty static since the end of the fundraising round. We thankfully haven't had to think about it too much until now. Now is sort of the time where we're thinking, okay, in the next couple of years, how are we going to address the funding problem? But more importantly, what are we actually going to do with this funding? We're kind of getting to the point now where we've built pretty much everything that's in our white paper to some extent. So now the question is, well, what do we do now? And the answer to that is we make them usable and we get people to use them, because only through actual adoption will Loki be a successful product. You can put something out into the world, but especially with apps like ours that require an anonymity set to actually be useful. Like if there's 10 people using Session, none of them are going to be anonymized because, well, the anonymity set is so small. So we're looking to get 200,000 daily active users of Session by the end of this year. That's our objective. That's why we've been scaling up with marketing. Because our mission really is to not just create cool things, but also to make sure that, they are actually useful and they are actually used and they do actually give people privacy.
And Edsel was cool. A DeLorean was cool. Not so much anymore.
It's just, Betamax, perfectly good protocol, but, at the end of the day, it didn't come through. So, we're in that same scenario that pretty much every startup's ever found themselves in, which is where we have some combination of product team and users, but the users part needs to go, and then the revenue part needs to follow that. Otherwise, how does that even work?
Sure.
So we're becoming more like a traditional startup as time goes on.
Phenomenal. So if I may offer you some kudos for that, I'll dig back into the other interview. But if I remember correctly, I'm gonna say I told you so to the audience. I believe I gave you kudos for conducting yourselves in that way early on, because here you are. Look what you've achieved. And look where your sights are set. Look what you could possibly stand to achieve in the future, only because you've conducted yourself like a business and not like a group of weekend warriors who are trying to throw together a joke token.
I mean, that is what we were to begin with, but that yielded good ideas, which yielded this business. So I think a lot of the cool little tools that people have built over the last 5 years, particularly in the Ethereum community, oh, look at this cool spec that I wrote for this thing that no one will ever use. It's cool on crypto Twitter for about 5 minutes amongst all your Ethereum friends or whatever, or your, I don't know. There's lots of examples of, it's not just Ethereum. I don't mean to dig on it, the Ethereum community specifically too much, but there's a lot of stuff that's just getting built, which is only getting built because people think it will be cool. But of course, it's only cool for about a week, and then the novelty wears off and you're left with the raw reality of the products, which is often unfinished and not that useful. Because
there isn't a broader market that assigns it value. To be sure, there's a lot of stuff that happens within cryptocurrency that stays within cryptocurrency. Again, you want to keep a secret, write a DApp. Problems with Loki to date, and I don't mean problems that, in terms of things that you think are a problem, but things that have resulted in real pain, real leaks, things like inflation bugs, botnets, 51% attacks. What sorts of things like that have happened in the history of Loki so far, and how have you handled them?
Our biggest technical challenge in Loki so far has been bugs in the service node consensus code. So there's been a few times now where we've done 7 hard forks now, which a lot of crypto projects would think is a bad idea. 7 times in 18 months, not a great way to ensure stability and keep your consensus mechanism stable. But, we got a lot of features to put out. We've got a lot of improvements to make. So we're constantly pushing them out whenever we need to. But sometimes we'll run into something, or we're getting better at this over time. But particularly when we changed the actual reward registration, deregistration system of the service node architecture itself, there's been cases where there'll be a chain split because certain OSs think one thing from another because of the way that they count integers, for example, or there'll be a discrepancy in the way certain nodes of one version versus the next point release will count as a valid service node collateral amount, which will cause some nodes to consider new registrations as valid and others as invalid, and that causes a chain split, which is never good. And this has happened 3 or 4 times now, all of which have made us extremely stressed and unhappy. But, you just roll with the punches. And the really cool thing about the Loki service node community is that they are extremely fast at updating. Whenever we put out a new point release to fix these issues, or we know that there's going to be an issue if people keep using a particular version, by a certain point in time, it'll be a problem. We quickly do the release. We quickly get the new binaries up that'll fix the problem. And we say, hey, get this on your servers now. The community, there's like almost 1,000 service nodes operating at the moment. And their ability to upgrade to new versions within 24 hours is incredible. So it means that the network, although it should have in theory be more unstable because of our fault, we're actually able to, our community is actually able to work with us and get these solutions implemented really fast to keep the network running, which is really fantastic. But yeah, they are definitely the biggest challenges that we've faced technically anyway.
It's interesting that it boiled down to, you mentioned a key difference in the way the different OSs were able to sum integers or deal with integers.
Something odd. I think it was to do with the way that they handled floating
point values. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
I can't remember. It was a while ago now, but yeah, there was something like that where there was like a tiny discrepancy in the way that these different OSs were counting,
and your code base hadn't at all been. And it had nothing to do with maybe an institutional change from, say, Python 2 to Python 3.
Well, you C++, so
sure, okay. I'm not familiar enough with your code, nor I only bring that up because I have a couple of brothers who are apparently dealing with clients that they're undergoing institutional changes from Python 2 to Python 3. And
it was a particular part of the process that we looked at of the code base, and we looked at and we're like, why is floating point math being used here? This doesn't make any sense. And I can't remember whether it was a Monero core part or whether it was something that we'd written. But I don't remember what it was now. But we all looked at it and we were like, why? Why has this been done this way? But we are very pressed for time, so I can't remember whether we ended up actually changing it all over to integers after we fixed the problem. Because once we fixed the problem, we knew the problem was fixed. So we're like, more tech debt. Why not? We'll just keep racking it up. No, I'm just kidding. I hope we solved it.
But it sounds like this is typical growing pain stuff. It sounds like you haven't had anything especially serious or malicious where a third party has come in and, say, tried to hash rate nuke you using a botnet yet.
There has been some evidence of hash attacks, but now we've been pretty okay in that regard.
Unique tech advantages for the future. So it sounds like right now Sessions is live today, not downloadable yet.
Loki Messenger is live today, which currently uses the mainnet storage service, but the Session app itself, which uses the onion routing aspect as well, is currently not out. Well, no. By the time this video releases, it's like either happened already or it's imminent. Give it another week or two. Yeah. And then we'll be sweet.
Got it. Okay. Frankly, I wanted to help kick off this series with your team, your project, and you. I think that what you're doing, it clearly speaks to some needs within the consumer privacy tech area. And obviously, that's based on what you said, that was the need you were trying to fill from day one. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about some personal reasons for that. But let's switch over to proof of work or just consensus in general. As things are today, what percentage of the block reward goes to mining?
45%. But I want it to be 0.
Wants and wishes were crackers and fishes. We'd all be fat and happy. So today, 45%. What's the timeline like to get to your desired 0?
I want to say that it will be 0 by July. I want to say that. But it really just depends on how we as a team prioritize new features on Loki Core. At the moment, there's a bit of cleanup that has to occur around Blink and some of the newer features that we've implemented. But once that's done and it pretty much is done. We got to have a sit down and actually decide, okay, what are we going to work on next, and who's going to do it, and how's it going to work. Proof of stake is pretty much, I think it's just finishing off LNS, and then under that is proof of stake for me. I think that's the breakdown of the priorities. So, yeah, I want to see it happen as soon as possible. But at the same time, it's core consensus stuff. You can't really rush these things. So,
sure.
I mean, 6 months doesn't sound like a long time if you think about it that way.
Yeah, it's weird though. So crypto really does warp time, because you've got block times that are, it's a pretty hard and fast rule for any network. Right? Your block times don't change, so coins are emitted and things happen. Transactions are recorded, and all sorts of things are put into a historical record. But at the same time, development is will skew people's perceptions of time, and new developments with related technologies will make sometimes a week feel like a day and a day feel like a week in crypto. It's kind of weird. So 6 months, yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot of time, but between now and then, for all we know, I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff can happen geopolitically that makes a difference, or financially that makes a difference. Related projects such as Monero they can discover some problem with the code base. 6 months sounds like a long time to me personally in crypto.
Yeah, well, we'll do the best we can.
Percentage of block reward today that is going to your service nodes, and how will that shift when it comes to proof of stake being implemented? Will it simply
50%? The remaining 5% goes to the LOKI Foundation, but by proof of stake, it'll be a 95 to 5% split between service nodes and the foundation. But also the net rewards that service nodes receive will increase, because the block reward under my proposal will reduce from 28 to 8. But given that the percentage that they will be earning is much higher, they'll actually end up better off because of that.
But as far as the consensus right now, or I should ask before moving on from block rewards, is there any other percentage of the block reward that has historically gone to anybody not mentioned?
Nope. Minus foundation service nodes. That's it.
Got it. Okay. You would be surprised at how many times I've asked that question and something comes up like, oh yeah, there was that one period during which a founder got this much. And it's like, whoa, really? Is this, I mean, it's just public, but it wouldn't be listed on the website. It wouldn't be something that they broadcast anymore. So kind of nice to revisit sometimes. But CPU, GPU, FPGA, ASIC, there's an arms race, right? When you start in proof of work, and it almost always starts at that level and progresses in that way. Where's all this going? Just on a large scale in the industry in general, where's it all going? And what does the rest of the project core team view as a reasonable decentralization of hash rate for LOKI?
I would say that Key and I no longer believe that proof of work is a viable consensus mechanism for projects with small projects, basically. It makes no sense. It just doesn't make sense. We can talk about hashing algorithms and various ways of engineering it such that you have, more GPUs, less GPUs, more CPUs, more FPGA ASICs, whatever. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. No matter what you choose, there's always going to be a downside. There's very few hobbyist miners left, which is what I think most people have in mind when they think about decentralized mining. It's a very unprofitable exercise for everyone involved these days. So not many people do it. The reality is, if you're talking about something which is more CPU optimized, such as we currently are, what you end up with is some random system administrator that has access to a data center somewhere and can just switch on spare CPU data cycles in his spare time and just like kind of piggyback off the infrastructure that's already running. He can just like take some more coin like LOKI and have 80% of the hash rate just straight up. Or you have ASIC miners who are constantly looking for the most efficient means of generating hashes per watt of electricity. So that's just a constant arms race. And it's always going to be dependent on who has the most efficient hardware and who has the cheapest electricity. And, the bigger your operation, the more efficient you're going to get at that. So I think proof of work in general is, no matter, it's just going to be a constant cat and mouse game to keep it even looking somewhat decentralized. And even then, it's not a fight worth fighting, because at the end of the day, the thing that bothers me most about proof of work is not the actual mining itself, it's the pools. Every coin has a very limited number of people that actually produce blocks. The miners don't produce blocks, the pools do. And the pools, in Loki's case, there's one pool that produces 80% of the blocks, called a monopool. And pretty much 80-90% of the small coins you'll see out there that are doing proof of work have a very similar kind of setup. There's one block producer, pretty much. And it's very hard to control and contain. The project team can have almost no influence over that without spending lots of money doing mining themselves, which is absurd. So, yeah, I don't think proof of work is a very viable consensus mechanism unless you're Bitcoin. But even then, there's 8 or 9 pools that produce all the blocks, and they could collude and la la la. It's not the best distribution system in the world. You'd be much better off having, say, a list of 120 people that all stake Loki and all have a service node or several service nodes and can come together, and you have some mixing process whereby every block is influenced by multiple people. Boom, 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 boom. We come to agreement about what the state of the chain is, and we don't have to send money to people that are just going to dump the coins that they receive to pay for the electricity that they're using to produce the hashes. It's crazy.
I definitely hear the criticisms, and I think to revisit our conversation from about nearly a year and a half ago, definitely the arms race aspect of it and the wastefulness of just throwing ASICs online, if it comes to that, right? When you get that level of refinement on a given hashing algorithm for a given coin, I personally view that as wasteful, because then you have this obsolescence curve of mining hardware. In under 3 months, sometimes you can see dedicated mining hardware, this fixed function compute unit, turn into garbage.
And yet, conversely, guess what is still one of the most popular mining units on Bitcoin?
The S9 is still, there's still plenty of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
what's that?
But there are
That's been what?
But
2 or 3 years? In terms of an obsolescence curve, you got to admit, that's pretty impressive.
It has done well, but that said, there's been a lot more ground broken in mining near natural gas flares and in mining at hydroelectric facilities. So the same can't be said of, say, like the S7.
No,
there are precious few of those.
No, that's right.
Yeah, and then on the alt networks. Yeah, Bitcoin, though, to your point, Bitcoin is kind of an anomaly when it comes to proof of work, but it's the king daddy of proof of work, and it was the feature.
I think that's the only scenario in which it does actually work quite well. I think Ethereum should have moved to proof of stake long ago.
They thought they were going to move to proof of stake long ago.
I don't like ragging on the Ethereum community and the Ethereum Foundation. It feels bad because they've tried so hard over the last 5 years to make the space the way we thought it was all going to be 2, 3, 4 years ago. But
they're also hurting cats. I think Hudson Jameson changed his name on Twitter to Cat Herder.
Exactly. There's not much in the way of leadership in the Ethereum community. In the Ethereum, I don't know how the Ethereum Foundation is structured, but I imagine that there's quite a lot of conflict and hand sitting that goes on around there.
Governance is, I think, when it comes to cryptocurrency projects, is a tricky thing, unless, for example, you like Loki, you build your business like a business. You build your product, your market offering like a business. Makes a lot of sense. You know who you serve, or you're trying to get a sense very strongly for who your customer avatar is and what they want. So that makes sense to me logically. But yeah, when you're an open source project that is trying to build the air quotes future of fill in the blank.
XYZ. Yeah.
Then you're always chasing that future fill in the blank. In terms of your Loki improvement proposal, you're eagerly pushing the switch from proof of work to proof of stake just as soon as possible. In the meantime, is there any other kind of a threat that would cause you to fork faster than, say, June? What level threat would require forking to proof of stake earlier or to a different proof of work algorithm earlier?
Well, we have checkpointing enabled now as well. Checkpointing is a feature where every 4 blocks, the service node network generates a quorum and they notarize the blockchain so that you can't have rollbacks and double spends and hash attacks and stuff like that. So at this point, checkpointing works really well now. So we don't care, like hash away, attack us, whatever. It won't matter at the end of the day. It's notarized, it's checkpointed.
This is a bit like the chain locks or like DPoW on other networks.
Correct. Yeah.
Pardon my ignorance to what the implementation that you have here. Is this something that Loki has innovated in-house?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. So the basic idea of a 51% attack is that because of the hash power you control, you can create a bunch of blocks on the side but not tell anyone about it, and then everyone's kind of creeping along, and then boom, you jump in front of them, you say, no, this is the actual history now, and you change a bunch of things that will makes you better off than everyone else. That's the basic idea. This is checkpointing basically stops people doing that, because there's short intervals in which the history can no longer be reverted. So it can only be reverted for a very short space of time, which prevents anyone being able to do that in a useful way.
As far as the current hash rate contributor, right, the current mining avatar, who does Loki Network want mining for them today? Who do they want staking for them in the future? And I should probably ask before then, with proof of stake, will staking only be done by masternode operators, or will it be done by any token holder?
No, masternode operators, but there are pooled masternodes as well, so people can contribute to other people's masternodes. That's a feature that's been in since the get-go. So in terms of mining anymore, not something we think about anymore. Because of checkpointing, basically, it's not. We're not really concerned about what happens there. We just want to get rid of it as soon as possible. The thing that we are concerned about is our service node operators. So that is a core function of all of our products, and it means that we have to nurture and encourage people to do that. So in terms of service node operators, who we're looking for technically oriented people that have some spare capital to invest and may want to park their money in a service node, earn rewards, and provide services to the network for said rewards. So that is something that we're looking for. It's one of those things where if the reward's high enough, people it's sort of build it and they'll come, and they have to a large extent come. But as always, we're always looking for more operators. We're trying to encourage them, educate them, provide them with documentation so they can, join the network whenever they feel like it. Just trying to pull up now the the dashboard, which will tell me how many service nodes there are right now.
And while you're doing that, I think transactions per second is usually a metric that coin projects like to boast of, right? When they've got a very high number in that category, they love to tell everybody, oh, we're X times faster than Bitcoin, or we can handle so many more transactions than Project X. It sounds like with the Loki network in the future, maybe a metric that people who are evaluating the project and evaluating its merits will be interested in will be number of messages per second or total throughput of LokiNet and now session. I wonder how the current master node, the current service node list, how that corresponds, how that correlates to total number of messages and total network throughput today. Do you already have a model for that?
That's an interesting question. You say that projects like to talk about transactions per second as a kind of bragging right.
Some do.
Some, no, it's true. Some do. Like Komodo, for example. Oh, we're so much faster than everyone else. Woohoo! Or EOS, like, wow, woohoo, we can do all this stuff. Great. But unless no one's actually making that many transactions per second, and if they are, it's causing extraordinary bloat, right? Every transaction that is sent gets added to the blockchain and must be permanently stored. So just because you can send 10 transactions to execute a function which could be executed in one transaction if you were smart about it and actually cared about efficiency, you just end up creating this extraordinary situation where you have blockchains that are, I can't remember, I haven't checked this in a long time, but it's something crazy like 3 months after the launch of EOS, it was something like a 4 terabyte blockchain already. Just like extreme bloat. Who's going to store 4 terabytes of blockchain history? Doesn't make, and that was 3 months afterwards. I would love to know what it is now.
But to your point, also, that's why so many different blockchain developers have worked on things like pruning, right? And other ways of making sure that the network doesn't grow so far out of control that 10 years down the line with like EOS, it's not a larger volume than exists on every data center across the world. If you want to be mean spirited, there's a lot of low hanging fruit in crypto.
There is. Anyway, sorry, what was the point again?
It dawned on me specifically that there may be a useful metric to people who are evaluating LokiNet in the future, because you have a public offering that is a consumer platform, that they may be interested in what your throughput is.
Yeah, I mean, scalability is a good question, but I think the crypto community has gotten far too obsessed about scalability, probably because Bitcoin is a pretty limited system.
Sure, but Simon, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you, and I'm talking about your goal of 200,000 users, 200,000 active users. Could they possibly even fit?
Easy.
Great.
No problem. Because we're not dependent on TPS or these arbitrary little things. All we need is a bit of disk space and a bit of bandwidth. And between 1,000 service nodes, 200,000 users a day is nothing. You know how small a message is? It's tiny. It's teensy, weensy, little small bit of data. And you send that over a network. Yeah, you underroute it, so there's a bit more traffic consumption there, and you store it on a thing for 24 hours. We did the maths. Even with a single gigabyte of storage on each individual's service node message storage device or area, actually, that was an old calculation when we had half as many service nodes. So we can now probably support, with that tiny amount of data, about 2 million daily active users already. And the nice thing about the service node network is that it is a self-regulating network. So if the requirement is that you store however many messages are given to you, whether that's a gigabyte worth of messages or 12 gigabytes worth of messages or 100 if it gets crazy, I don't think it will. But let's say 100 gigabytes worth of message storage, ephemeral message storage, you'll just have to do that. Because if you fail to route messages, if you fail to store messages, the other service nodes in the network will boot you off. So all it means is you need a bigger server. If you can get a bigger server with more bandwidth, more storage available, more processing capacity to handle all that bandwidth and that storage, you'll always be fine. So it's a self-healing solution. And eventually, if service nodes are required to handle a lot of traffic for each individual dedicated server, that could be bad, because it could mean that everything has to be routed through these expensive dedicated servers that all end up in being like half a dozen data centers around the world, which would be not great for distribution. So in that case, we could slightly change the model where instead of being a single server, a service node registration actually represents a cluster of capacity. So you could actually set up your own internal network to be able to handle the data that's being sent to your service node, or in this case, your cluster. And that would allow you to, distribute it a little bit more.
And it sounds like at this point, though, you're trying to attract service node operators that would be handy enough with dealing in data center, like in various different data center configurations, that they could do that without too much difficulty. They would know.
Right, but that's a problem for way down the track. We've got to get 2 million daily active users before that's actually a problem.
Sure.
The current setup will handle it, no worries. So this is not something that we're overly concerned with at the moment. It might mean that your monthly server cost goes up from $5 or $10 to $10 or $15 in the future, or up to $20 or $30. But hopefully, if there are millions of users, that translates into a higher value for Loki, higher value for rewards, and so because the rewards are worth more, you can offset those higher costs with those higher rewards. So
sure.
We think it's a pretty good self-regulating system that doesn't require a lot of intervention or changing, if that makes sense, in terms of scalability, because it's more of it sort of automatically load balances. We don't have to do anything fancy to the underlying protocol, because the blockchain itself doesn't route messages. There's no limitation because a blockchain is as strong as its weakest node. So because the data has to be replicated across every single node on the network, you're limited by the smallest node on the network, or what you think is acceptable to be the smallest node on the network. But with this messaging system, you only have to replicate a tiny fraction of the total traffic that's actually being routed, because you only have to go, oh, that person wants that sent there, sweet, and then everyone else is doing that for a whole bunch of different clients.
Sure,
it's a more normal setup, right?
Sure. The only reason I bring up the that as a metric is not because I think that TPS is the most important thing, nor do I believe erroneously that TPS would be directly applicable to what you're doing with a service node. Node network, but merely to kind of bring to light that there's a huge difference in the value proposition of what LokiNet is and what Loki is building versus everybody else that says, look, our main feature is transactions. Ergo, we have to show you a bigger number than somebody else, or we don't have much value.
Right. Or yeah.
Greater
that's
throughput.
Exactly right.
Like it's the hill that everybody else is choosing to die on. Is that we have to be a better money than money? Wait, what do you mean? What value are you actually giving?
And Ethereum has a lot of throughput, right? Like not enough people say there needs to be more, but the obvious problem with that is, well, the blockchain just becomes insanely huge, and even if you don't store the whole archive data of Ethereum, which very few people do these days, sharding is not really a solution, because you're just kind of breaking up the problem where an individual node can't really run it. So everyone ends up relying on like 2 or 3 big service providers that are actually tracking it, and they monetize their service to people like Etherscan putting ads on it, and it ends up just being like a Google kind of situation where certain people have access to information, this big old search engine, and they'll sell you shit for getting that information off them.
Oh, for sure.
It's the same deal. It's not congruent with what this space was trying to achieve 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
And I think in the interim from our last interview, I believe that it was during that time that AWS offered a one-click install of some EVM tie-ins. I'm trying to remember the news that I read, but it had to do with one major public cloud provider saying, "Hey, look, you've got an easy tie-in to the EVM," and so many of us facepalm like, this is the beginning of the end. Yeah. If you weren't monitoring before, it's like, okay, now you need to know everything now. I wonder why. Thank you for indulging me. It's actually not one of the questions I'm asking other projects, because it doesn't apply, right? They don't have any other offering other than just their blockchain. So that's it's pretty cool. You should feel special that
we do.
So on privacy, this is the meat and potatoes. Realistic, and I've asked all kinds of projects, proof of stake projects that are public ledger. Spoke with Tron Black and Jeremy Corbin over at the Ravencoin project, their thoughts on privacy, even though their project doesn't directly address privacy. So this matters to me on a personal level, and I think a lot of people within the crypto space have this as a personal concern. It attracts a lot of folks in crypto. But briefly, the tech for Loki. What percentage, and this is a pretty straightforward question for you guys, what percentage of transactions on your network are currently private based on user behavior?
100? Wow. Now we have special transaction types, which are basically service node updates. So like, I want to register a service node, or I want to unlock my service node, or things like that. They're not 100% private, because obviously they refer to a specific service node. But in terms of transaction privacy, if you send money using Loki, you can't not be private. You can't fuck it up.
Awesome. And that is because it uses which privacy mechanism?
It uses the CryptoNote protocol, which is the very same that Monero uses, which is a multi-pronged effort to keep your transaction metadata secure through ring signatures, stealth addresses, and now bulletproofs, which are 3 different ways that we can address metadata concerns with public ledger transactions. So your transaction still goes onto a public ledger. It's just utterly meaningless to everyone except you and the recipient. And even the recipient doesn't can't know who it came from. Obviously, if I say, hey, Seth, I'm going to send you some money, and then you get that amount of money, obviously you know it's coming from me, but you can't know what my address is, for example.
You'd be like, you literally putting cash in my hand. I wouldn't necessarily know where your safe is at home.
Correct. Yeah. It behaves like cash is a good way to think about it. Sure, there can be stuff that contextually happens around the particular cash transaction. I literally pass you money, but no one else has to know about that. And you don't know its history. I don't know where it's going next. I can't follow it along in the future, any of that kind of thing. So, yeah. There are some downsides with CryptoNote, but there's privacy is a trade-off, right? If you have convenience, you end up with less privacy. Is generally the way it goes.
As far as the development of the CryptoNote protocol and the peer review or scholarly study of the CryptoNote protocols, ring signatures, stealth addresses, bulletproofs, where can people read third-party criticism?
Well, there's been lots over the years. A good collation of the persistent issues with CryptoNote and how those issues have been solved can be found if you search for the Monero Research Lab. That's a loose group of people that we sponsored at one point who do ongoing research into the CryptoNote protocol, and particularly how it pertains to Monero, about various attacks and issues with the way it's constructed, and methods to improve or mitigate those issues. So there is quite a bit of scholarly literature available about various aspects of the CryptoNote protocol, particularly with ring signatures is a field of continuous study. But at this stage, in my opinion, it's a pretty established piece of cryptography. A lot of the sort of teething issues have been worked out. We identified that having a fixed ring size was a good idea very early on, so that's something we implemented in LOKI straight away. For example, Monero followed on sometime later. But yeah, it's a pretty mature system, I would say. The most game-changing improvement that has been made to it in the last 18 months has been the introduction of bulletproofs, which are, we used to use these things called range proofs, which do a very similar thing, which is basically when you post a transaction on the public ledger, you need to be able to prove that your transaction is non-negative, or in other words, that you're not sending yourself money, because if you can create more money if the value goes below zero. So a range proof is a type of mathematical proof, zero knowledge proof actually, that allows you to prove that your number is between zero and a very large number, infinity, more Monero or whatever than could ever possibly exist. It's above zero, basically. You can prove it's above zero without actually revealing what that number is. And so there were range proofs. Problem with them is they often took up like 12 kilobytes of space, and it's a good transaction. So a lot of space. Yeah. Too much space.
Sounds like a tiny bit in isolation, but it adds up.
Well, for example, we used range proofs initially in the first year of LOKI or something like that. A blockchain grew to 10 gigabytes in that size, and then the year following, it's only grown by 3 gigabytes, despite the usage of it increasing dramatically. So that's a pretty good indicator of sort of scalability improvements we're talking about here. Then bulletproofs do exactly the same thing, but they take the size down from like 12 kilobytes down to like 1 or slightly less than 1. So save a lot of space, make transaction a lot smaller, better scalability, better usability, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, CryptoNote. Thumbs up.
You know, I'm a fan. I don't know if you saw it. I don't know if you tuned in when I forked Turtlecoin live with Rocksteady, but that was fun. I had a secret admirer come in and mine the first 60 blocks live while I was forking it. So that was, again, huge fan. But I'm asking this because it's an apples to apples comparison. I'm going to be talking to Komodo and Pirate Chain, and I think Arrow Chain as well, a few other projects that are using ZK Snarks. So we'll be comparing, contrasting. On that note, does it require trusted setup?
Nope.
What's the anonymity set size?
On what, Monero or LOKI?
Yes.
You can't answer an open question with a closed answer.
Well, in that case, I can. Please give me the answer to both.
Monero, a lot. Loki, quite a lot. Not quite as much because it's younger, but still quite a lot.
Okay, and that's the network anonymity set size, or that is the per transaction anonymity set size? Again,
transaction set.
Got it.
Yeah, because apples to apples comparison, as you say.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, the anonymity set is large enough that it shouldn't concern anyone. And if you are concerned about it, you are extremely paranoid. And yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's not an issue.
A couple of questions that I think will help clarify this. Chain analysis has been something that has been a huge concern for users of cryptocurrencies recently, primarily because of a couple of exchanges saying, hey, you off-ramped your Bitcoin, and within, say, half a dozen jumps, we noticed that you used CoinJoin, or you somehow tumbled your coins using Wasabi Wallet or some other third-party solution. Ergo, we don't want to do business with you anymore. We no longer like the color of your Bitcoin. And so people have been really focused on this, worried about chain analysis. To your knowledge, has chain analysis ever been successfully executed on Monero or Loki?
Not that I'm aware of. There's been some theoretical attacks that have been pointed out and fixed. Monero does actually have a spotty history in its early days with the way that it did ring signatures and things like that. So those transactions may have been potentially de-anonymized, but I'm not aware of that actually having taken place. But all of those issues had been resolved by the time Loki forked from Monero. So we don't believe there are any persistent issues within Loki in regards to the ability for someone to de-anonymize someone's transaction.
Got it. Okay. So perhaps somewhere in the lineage with Monero and in the legacy network or transaction history.
Yeah.
But not anytime recently.
No, certainly not in Loki's blockchain history.
What's the data cost? Rather, the cost both in terms of data and time.
What's the settlement time for a single transaction?
Yes.
With Blink, our new feature on the mainnet, it's very quick, like under 10 seconds, under 5 or 10 seconds. It's pretty much like Dash's instant send feature. It's the same thing, just built on top of Loki. So you can send a transaction and then it has finality pretty much straight away. It's like cash. It's like, here's a $5 note. Great. Thank you very much. Now you got it. It's more like cash now.
It sounds like with the anti-51% attack measures you put in place, this is less of a concern, having settlements be so fast before the block has been recorded. That's
right, because the service node quorum that has been entrusted with Blinks for that period of time holds on to those transactions and it gives you a guarantee that eventually it will be included in a block.
So yeah, in the event, the very unlikely event, it sounds like, of somebody executing a 51% attack and attempting to rewrite a block, a single block of history, it sounds like that would be resolved before too long.
Yes. Well, that's through checkpointing, but also through the fact that the service nodes will reject transactions that come into the mempool that conflict with the current quorum of Blink transactions.
I appreciate you explaining this for a layperson. I'm sure it's painfully obvious. I don't program, and I'm not actually a blockchain developer.
To be honest, I don't know exactly perfectly how it works either. Jason wrote this amazing paper on the specifics of it, and I'm not all that across it. But that is the crux of it. The net result is that you can send money instantly.
Great. As far as verification time, it sounds like when Blink is finally deployed today, what is it like today?
Today it works in the command line interface. So if you want to pay for pizza with your laptop, you can do it instantly. But yeah, currently not available in the graphical wallet. So we just got to do that, and then you can do it.
So this is just me saying to the audience, don't have a 10,000 Bitcoin pizza moment with your Loki. Don't let go of it that easily.
By the time this video comes out, who knows? Maybe you'll be able to have that 10,000 Bitcoin pizza moment. Because I think we're working on the wallets now, so it shouldn't take too long.
The crypto note privacy tech that's used by Loki, are origin and destination wallet address known?
It depends to who. On the public ledger, no, you don't know who it is being sent to because of stealth addresses, and you don't know where it's come from because of ring signatures.
Okay,
but yeah,
great. And
if you have a view key of someone, which doesn't allow you to spend on their behalf, but allows you to inspect the contents of their wallets, then you can do that kind of stuff. But you obviously have to get the view key off them, etc. And you can't get that on the public ledger. So, you know.
Sure. Yeah, that's voluntary.
Yeah.
It's meant to be volunteered by a person in order to prove funds, right? So
yeah.
Awesome. Is the transaction amount known?
It's not publicly visible.
What other privacy functions aside from transactions are supported on the blockchain? That wasn't really the scope of Loki, right?
No, the blockchain just does transactions. There's no smart contracts or anything like that.
Got it.
In terms of off the blockchain, though, we have LokiNet, which is a network layer packet anonymization system, which you can use to browse the internet anonymously, similar to Tor, in a trustless fashion. Or you can also send messages over session, which allows you to send end-to-end encrypted messages over a decentralized network with pretty much metadata-less communication. So no one knows what you're saying or who you're talking to at that particular time. So
yeah, very succinctly put. That's an exciting piece of tech. I can't wait to use it. I really can't. I can't wait to review it. So those are some privacy functions that are being produced by the Loki network, and I'm curious about wallets. And as far as the currency Loki, is there support for Loki on third-party wallets?
Yeah, anyone can build an implementation on it.
I guess what I'm asking is who has?
Problem is, a lot of the time when we've talked to third-party wallet providers, they want money to integrate it. And we're like, well, we have perfectly good wallets already, and we're basically just throwing money away here. Same with exchanges, right? We've talked to hundreds of exchanges at this point, but they're all run in a very sketchy manner and have lots of wash trading. So they're made to look really big, but it doesn't actually bring any users. I think with the notable exception of Binance, I don't think any exchange listing actually brings a project new users at all. The old theory was that, if you get listed on an exchange, all of the people on that exchange go, what's this new project? And they look at that and then they can trade it straight away. It never happens, ever, because there's just too much now. It's too many damn coins.
Sure. Well, and to that point as well, for anybody who's watching and maybe considering going on to new exchanges, it's an OpSec problem to go through KYC and AML on 15 different exchanges. You've duplicated your personal docs a dozen times with exchanges of maybe not the greatest reputation, trying to squeeze projects like Loki here. So yeah, that it doesn't make much sense. I think the proliferation of exchanges was definitely a problem. I wonder if that's being mitigated though in 2020. If that's going away. Maybe we're seeing fewer exchanges, or
it's hard to tell. There's so many popping up. There's so many that have popped up. You just hear all these new names all the time. I don't know whether they're recent phenomenon or not. I think the problem will get slightly better with the way that CoinMarketCap has changed the way it reports volume. I think it actually does somehow. I think the tables have turned, and I think it does a better job now at explaining what is actually going on in an exchange than CoinGecko does now. Because they put this thing in called a trust score with liquidity and stuff, but I don't think it's actually very reliable. I've looked at a number of exchanges using that tool now, and I've actually gone in to look at the pairs, and you just look at the chart straight away, and you can just see that it is still being wash traded, and yet the trust score is green. So, I think it actually paints a pretty skewed picture, because the problem with all these trust scores and stuff like that is that the people that are operating the exchanges learn how to make the trust scores happy, so they can still do the same shady practices with a few alterations, so long as they pander to whatever algorithm that CoinGecko or whoever has designed, they can get around these issues. So a good example of this is a big factor that people look at on CoinGecko these days is their Alexa score, which is a public utility that Amazon has to be able to tell you how highly this website ranks in terms of traffic, estimates how much traffic this website receives.
Sure. And to your point, it's a public utility that Amazon bought. I stopped trusting it after Amazon acquired it.
What I've seen is a lot of these exchanges have figured out how to inflate their Alexa rank artificially to make it look like they have a lot of traffic. But then you look at other metrics where they have zero, like almost zero liquidity on all of their pairs, and they have like 2,000 Twitter followers, where an equivalent exchange of that Alexa rating has something like 300,000 Twitter followers, even Chinese ones, which don't really use Twitter all that much. And you go, well, yeah. So people get real smart about how to evade these trust scores thing. It's becoming a bit like the ASIC race in a lot of ways. People are trying to find ways to get around the algorithms, and sort of hack it to make themselves have a larger pool, not in terms of hash rate, but in terms of projects' money to pay for listings that they don't need.
It's a tough thing to approach, though, because the incentive is there, right? And anywhere that there's incentive, you find practices that push the envelope, and then others that, tear it up and burn it. So, yeah. Maybe it doesn't go away 2020. It'd be nice to see it decrease. Certainly from an OpSec standpoint, doesn't make sense to go putting your docs on a new exchange every other week. But
yeah, I think if people just stick to, they either think about things on a per project basis. So they think, I want to invest in this project. Where is the best place I can do that is currently available? And then they can go and do that. Or they go, I'm just going to trade on one reputable exchange. Kraken's my favorite personally, in terms of reputable markets for exchanging cryptocurrencies. I think there's some really smart guys that have been around the scene for a long time, made some good acquisitions and have really interesting back end that gives them pretty good liquidity across their products. Binance is obviously a good option just because it's popular, even though they are moving very quickly all the time and trying to constantly push the envelope, which is good in one sense because it means things happen, but there may be consequences for moving too quickly as well. But
yeah, could be. I mean, yeah, they're not nearly as they're not offering leverage to the extent of something like BitNext though. So I think they'll maintain a good place in the public trust.
Yeah, well, the whole derivative space is a whole nother ball game. That's another interesting conversation as well. But anyway,
yeah. So
moving on.
Thank you. As far as there being additional support with third-party wallets, it sounds like today you've only interacted with developers that are squeezing you for an integration fee, and
that's basically the only people that we have interactions with.
It's a bummer.
Pretty much across the board. I mean, yeah, that's just the reality of being a crypto project since 2017. It's just people know you have money and know you want more users to buy your coin, so they tell you that, look, more people will buy your coin if you pay us this money to integrate this thing, blah, 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 even though it takes 5 minutes. In reality, they're just doing it because they want to squeeze you for cash. So we just end up not doing a lot of stuff that people would think is obvious because we know that no one will use it, and we'll end up spending more money than actual volume will go through the process. At that rate, we'd almost be better off just straight up buying our own coin with that kind of money.
Sure.
It'd be quicker and have better results, so it doesn't make any sense.
What a bummer. It's not a problem that I can personally relate to, but it makes sense when you explain it that way. As far as there being good mobile wallet support, is there a mobile wallet for Loki today?
For Android and iOS.
Phenomenal. And pardon my ignorance, is it a multi-wallet? Does it support any other coins other than Loki?
Nope. No, it's just a Loki wallet.
Okay. The reason that I ask, and the reason I'm asking every project this question, is just because there are some underserved markets, right, in developing nations where the mobile first experience is the only digital experience that many users will have, and that's unlikely to change in the future because of the proliferation of mobile broadband, and then the increase in the relative compute power of handheld devices.
Yeah,
areas when technology does really break through there, or if the middle class does grow in these areas, they're likely to start and stay on mobile devices.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, great. So you got your wallet, and it's good. So privacy, of course, using the CryptoNote protocol is intact on the mobile experience.
Yeah, it's a native wallet, so it uses a remote node, but that doesn't really have any implications in terms of privacy.
Got it. And again, I'm asking the same thing of many different projects. In some projects, in the case of some projects, even when they have really strong cryptography and really strong privacy protocols, they break on mobile because they're not implemented on mobile.
Because it's harder, iOS is particularly very fussy about what goes through its app store. So you have to be quite careful about what you actually put in your app, because they're very particular about lots of things, actually.
Yeah.
It's not surprising, but we dealt with it.
So Simon's opinions on favorite private currencies. This can be anything from an AFK means of exchange to a notional currency, something that's like an unspoken or a spoken contract between two people. What are your top three?
I like cash. I like fiat cash. That might be a controversial opinion, but cash is pretty cool. I like cash. I like LOKI, obviously, because it's kind of one of those things where we've taken all of the things we don't really like all that much about Monero and then try to fix some of those problems. So it's like Monero Plus, in my opinion. So there's that. And then I also really liked Grin and Beam until I learned that the miners can see everything when they create the blocks.
Do tell.
It's not even the interactive transaction like malarkey thing going on where you have to, do the thing. But literally when you create a block, you just know everything. So that's not great, is it?
No, not at all. Okay, well, that's good to know. That's the first I've heard of it. I'd read a piece talking about de-anonymizing Mimblewimble, and then apparently Trump and others who are core developers on Grin, they issued a rebuttal talking about, hey, we know about certain potential de-anonymization vectors or threat vectors, and they made a really compelling case. So I thought the case was closed. This is the first I'm hearing about this. That miners can potentially de-anonymize Grin.
Well, if they keep a record of the pre-computed transactions before they go into the block, my understanding is that they can just hold on to that record for ever if they want to, and then sell it off or whatever, So
okay, so you could potentially be. It sounds like one potential threat vector then is to be a miner and to stage a mining.
It's not. My main issue with it is it's not really a trusted system, is it? Because you have to trust the block creators. I mean, it's probably fine. It's like we rely on, block explorers and all sorts of technologies in the crypto world to tell us information that we just take at face value and believe it to be the case. So, from that perspective, yeah, sure. Why not trust the block producers? They're not given software by default that would allow them to track long-term the actual metadata of every transaction. But they could be. It's like a VPN provider, right? It's the same sort of threat model.
Sure.
But, in this space, we value trustlessness more than pretty much anything else. So, yeah, I think it's a pretty crazy model, if you ask me. But anyway, whatever.
Sure. So Grin was the third until it fell from grace. Would there be something that replaces it?
Probably no. I'd still put it there because it is a really elegant system. It's really nice. Maybe there's a way to fix the mining thing. I'm not sure. I don't know all that much about it, to be honest. But I think it is an elegant system. It's efficient, scalable. I like it. It's good.
Okay, got it. As a follow-up question, what are your favorite privacy wallets?
Wallets. It's an interesting question. Probably the wallets for those three projects. I'm not a big fan of multi-wallets. There's usually a fair bit of trust involved in those. So I prefer to use native open source implementations produced by the project team that actually built the thing. So for example, with Bitcoin, I use Bitcoin Core as my main wallet. I don't use anything else because I don't see why you'd bother, It does the thing. It is the thing. So just use the thing, you know? Yeah. Okay. Just native wallets. That suits me just fine.
Got it. Well, then let me just ask in terms of practical privacy, because the top for your list was cash. What's your favorite style of billfold or cash wallet?
I'll share my wallet. Like my actual wallet, this wallet.
Cool. All right.
It's called a Secret, right? It's a little aluminium sleeve with a fold out money clip. There's some Australian cash there, some good old plastic Aussie dollars. This is called a pineapple because it's yellow, I believe. So yeah, got a little fold out thing here. You put your beautiful fiat cash in there, then you close it up like that. And if you want to access your cards of various formats, you have a little tab here. You push that, it goes pop like that, and then you can access your cards. Got my gym card here. Go to the gym, and I put it back. Boom, and then I've got my keys in there as well, slotted between some cards and whatever. It's just very compact, very nice. This is probably my favorite wallet. It's got a very, very simple user experience. You just pick it up, and then you go like that, and then you use it. I don't have to open my phone even.
Got it. No minting, no burning, no mixing.
No mixing, nothing like that. No addresses, no nothing. I just go. I'm ready to go.
It's crazy. Novel concept. So yeah. Cool wallet. Thanks for sharing that. As far as your favorite privacy tech, something you think maybe most consumers don't use as much as they should, or something that is maybe just a personal favorite for some other reason, a la VPN, Tor. And I'll give you one caveat here. You may not mention anything produced by LOKI yet.
Okay. So sorry, the question was my favorite privacy tool that's not a wallet, then not LOKI. I really like Veracrypt, which is a utility that allows you to create encrypted file containers that can be mounted as a drive on your computer. But then when you close them up, you can choose all these different encryption algorithms. It's just a really clever and interesting way of doing secure passive file storage. It's really sweet.
That's pretty cool. Is that an open source project, Veracrypt?
Yeah, it's based on TrueCrypt, which is an older project. I'm not sure if Veracrypt's maintained anymore. There's a few like it, but yeah, Veracrypt is open source and available on various operating systems and what have you.
Cool. All right. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe a neat way for people to back up their wallets on a USB drive then, or whatever else is using Veracrypt.
Yeah, I mean that is what I don't store private keys in it, but I have a container where I store all of my wallet files that also require a password, and then because that container is encrypted, I'm able to upload that container to the cloud, so I can pull down my wallet files off the cloud, knowing that they don't even know what's in the container. They don't know that it's wallet files, and they will never be able to access it. And then I can pull down those wallet files, use the wallet files, and put in separate. So I've got a password for the container, password for the wallet files, which is like overkill. Overkill's all hell, but
you're keeping Google and Amazon, whoever else, honest then.
Yes, well, yeah, it's trustless, right? I don't here have the container. It doesn't bother me. You can't get into it. I don't care. And it's got a cool feature called hidden containers as well, which allows you to have plausible deniability about what's in your things. You can set up you'll see. Very cool project. You should check it out.
Yeah, no, you're not kidding. I will definitely see it. It's like the first thing I'm checking on DuckDuckGo after this interview's over. So I'm going to ask point blank. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but in your opinion, does privacy matter?
Yes. Am I going to get away with just saying yes, or do I have to? I suppose you're going to want me to go on some sort of exposition about it, so I will.
No, the follow-up is actually quite pointed.
Okay.
What would a complete and total lack of privacy look like?
You ever read George Orwell's 1984? That is a book not really about bureaucracy and surveillance as much as it is about what happens to people when they think they're being watched. So if you know that you could be watched all the time, that drastically changes your behavior. So you can no longer be the true you, which is a very detrimental thing. We're often most creative selves, we do a lot of thinking and a lot of processing when we're alone. Solitude is a very important part of the human experience, which can't occur without privacy. And if we're in an environment where we behave as if though we're being watched at every moment, that changes us as a species, and it's not good. We shouldn't do it.
Okay, so it sounds like then, the primer for anybody who wants to see in your mind the image of a total lack of privacy is the book 1984.
Absolutely.
Okay, then Big Brother. Yeah, you've heard that expression before. I had half a mind to put a Big Brother is watching you poster as the backdrop for all these interviews, but I realized it would change the behavior of my interviewees.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Big Brother is actually, from 1984. That's where it comes from. Big Brother's the all-seeing, all-powerful, the man behind the system that watches you kind of character. Yeah, I
recall that one detail.
So that's where it comes from.
Yeah, the a detail from the protagonist of the book who has a varicose vein or varicose itch on his leg, and he's always tempted to scratch it, but doesn't. One of those little character development pieces that stuck with me far more than a lot of the other details of the book, actually, because I thought, man, it's maddening. You can't scratch that itch.
Exactly.
So no, I definitely appreciate that tops your list of what it would look like to have zero privacy. On the flip side, though, Simon, what would, in your mind, the best implementation, like the gold ring for total privacy, if we accomplish that, what would that look like?
I don't think we ever will have total privacy. It's not necessary. Part of the wonderful thing about the internet is that we can broadcast things so easily and make things known and make things public. It's about having the option that's important, the option to access the right to privacy. So I think, the ultimate form is obviously we have absolute control, and only by thinking about it can we, like the best system that I can think of is like we have, this device, whatever, and just by thinking about how much privacy we want this particular information that we're generating to have, it'll just magically in the background do whatever is necessary to make sure that only the people that we want to see it, whether that be 2 people, 4 people, or as many people as possible, see it. And it just all happens in the background, some sort of automated magical system. But as we know, operational security is never that straightforward. So
sure.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a case of compromises. There's always going to be a case of problem solving, cat and mouse, et cetera, et cetera. It's just something that we got to continuously keep ourselves educated on. And then there's just fundamental limitations. Like, sure, we can use Session, what will probably be the world's most private messenger that's actually relatively usable. And we can be talking on it. But then if I say, if you tell someone else what I told you over that messenger, or screenshot it and then send it to someone else, well, then there's no more privacy. So, we still have to trust the people that we're talking with, that they're not going to snitch on us. That's never going to change. So there's just some fundamental human communication issues as well. It's not everything's technically solvable.
Sure. Well, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I've had a couple of interviews already where developers, we tend to, especially talking to highly technical people in the crypto space, a lot of developers who say, well, we're working on trustless systems. Everything will be solved, or Bitcoin fixes this. It's like, no. I mean, aren't you like twice divorced? Did Bitcoin fix your marriage, bro? No. Some things just don't change, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you going through that stable of questions on the personal side. I think what matters most in terms of any of these conversations, there are some projects that aren't building anything that's privacy oriented, but in talking with their founders, it gives me a lot of hope for the future, because a lot of these privacy opinions are, I think what the individual contributors and leaders of these projects believe, to your last point there, it's equally important versus what they're building. Because it'll shape in the future what they choose to build or how they choose to build.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But The project can be found at loki.network, correct?
That's right. And if you want to check out our new messaging product, you can go to getsession.org.
Okay. And I'll have links to both of those in the description. Is there a best way to approach the team? And I'm sorry to phrase it that way, but this is crypto and fangs come out quickly.
Yeah, well, we are on Twitter. My handle is Simon A. Harman. Simon A. Harman, at Simon A. Harman. If you want to chat to me, you can message me or tweet at me or whatever. There's emails, there's Discords, there's Telegrams, there'll be session groups once it's out. There are multiple ways of doing it. There's a Discord that was quite popular in the early days. Well, if you just go to loki.network, you've got to find our socials, you've got to find specifically who you want to talk to. You can reach us in a myriad of ways. Whichever way you prefer, we'll get around to it.
Okay, great. And then two questions that are certainly important to me personally. The first is, did I ask for or did we arrange a bounty to set up this interview?
No, we didn't.
Okay. And the last question is very important. Can I borrow 50,000 ETH in exchange for my new token, KEX?
It's funny. We have a lot of people, a lot of scammers, like they create a Telegram account and they'll make it look exactly like mine. And then they'll message other members, like other core team members on the team, just being like, oh, hey man, I just really need to borrow some ETH. I'll send it straight back to you. I'm in the middle of this meeting, yada, yada, yada. But it's all in like super broken English. So we have a bit of a fun time now in our own internal chat groups, screenshotting these conversations as we like basically fuck with them for as long as possible until they give up. It's kind of like the telemarketer thing where you just like keep stringing them along as possible. It's a fun game.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's like, wow, this sounds like Simon. Yeah, for sure. Yes, dear. Yeah, dear, can I borrow 50? Sir? Sir? Yeah,
that kind of thing. It's fun.
I think I've been contacted by you a couple of times actually on Discord.
Really?
Doily, I think it was, because you used to Doyle. Didn't you used to go by Doily?
Yeah, that's his GitHub name, Doily, but it's Doyle. That's his actual name is Doyle.
Got it. Okay, yeah. I think I've been approached by Doyle, and I think I've been approached by Key and you.
Yeah.
Each individually, like fake doppelgangers. But
yes.
Okay, cool. Well, I definitely appreciate you. I think that was a semi-firm commitment. If you want to invest in my new token, it's kex.win. I kid. Yeah. Yeah. I love that some of these recent, like these things move in cycles, right? We've seen this. We keep seeing it over and over again.
Keep saying what?
Just the same types of stuff that happen in crypto, right? Where it's like, the next best thing. It's amazing. Come in, drop your ETH here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna flush the core fundraising wallet by 1,337 coins at a time. I don't know if that's supposed to spell leet or yeet. Either way, like bravo. People still get away with it. I'm almost not even mad, but I appreciate your time. Without further ado, I should let you get back to your schedule. I really appreciate you spending the time. Appreciate you going over the very personal reasons for your foray into privacy. It sounds like based on what you communicated to me of your vision of privacy, what it should look like and what it can look like versus what you're building, you're really pushing to have a high degree of integrity in what your project stands for. And I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for that, man. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Hey, hey.